The evening began with a simplicity that neither Barış Arduç nor Elçin Sangu had experienced in a long time. It was supposed to be nothing more than a quiet dinner, an escape from the noise, the cameras, and the constant attention that followed them wherever they went. The restaurant they chose was small, tucked away in a quiet street, far from the bustling city lights. Soft golden lamps illuminated each table, and the gentle hum of conversation created a calm, almost private atmosphere. Barış arrived first. He preferred it that way. Sitting by the window, he glanced outside at the slow-moving evening traffic, his fingers lightly tapping the edge of the table. There was something different about tonight. Not dramatic, not overwhelming. Just a subtle feeling that lingered quietly in his chest. A few minutes later, Elçin walked in. She didn't make a grand entrance. She didn't need to. Her presence alone shifted the atmosphere. Dressed elegantly yet simply, she looked around briefly before her eyes found Barış. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, almost naturally, she smiled. And just like that, the evening began. "Sorry I'm late," she said softly as she approached. "You're right on time," Barış replied, standing up slightly, his voice calm but warm. They sat across from each other, a small table between them, but the distance felt almost non-existent. At first, the conversation was light. They talked about work, about recent projects, about the usual things people say when they are easing into a moment. There was laughter, soft and genuine. But beneath the surface, something deeper was quietly building. The waiter arrived, taking their orders. Neither of them paid much attention to the menu. It wasn't about the food. It was about the time. As the evening unfolded, the outside world seemed to fade. The restaurant grew quieter, or maybe it just felt that way to them. "Do you ever feel like everything moves too fast?" Elçin asked, her voice thoughtful. Barış looked at her for a moment before answering. "All the time. That's why nights like this matter." There was a pause. Not an awkward one, but the kind that carries meaning. Elçin leaned back slightly, her eyes soft. "We don't do this enough." "No," Barış agreed. "We don't." The food arrived, but neither of them rushed. Each moment stretched naturally, filled with quiet glances and unspoken understanding. At one point Elçin laughed, a real laugh, the kind that wasn't for anyone else. Barış watched her, a small smile forming on his face. "What?" she asked, noticing. "Nothing," he said, shaking his head slightly. "Just you seem happy." She looked down for a moment, then back at him. "I am." Another pause. But this time it felt different. The kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Outside, the night deepened. The streetlights cast soft reflections on the window beside them. Inside, the warm glow of the restaurant wrapped around their table like a quiet secret. Barış reached for his glass but stopped midway, his attention still fixed on Elçin. "You know," he said slowly, "this wasn't what I expected tonight." Elçin raised an eyebrow, slightly curious. "What did you expect?" "A normal dinner," he admitted. "And this isn't normal?" she asked, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. He hesitated. "No," he said finally. "This feels different." Elçin didn't respond immediately. Instead, she let the moment settle, her fingers gently tracing the edge of the table. "Different isn't always a bad thing," she said softly. Barış nodded. "I know." Their conversation shifted after that. It became more personal, more real. They spoke about things they rarely shared, dreams, fears, the quiet moments that no one else ever sees. The kind of conversation that doesn't need to be loud to be meaningful. Time passed without either of them noticing. The plates were cleared. The restaurant began to empty. But neither of them made a move to leave. It was as if both were waiting for something, though neither could quite explain what. Finally, Elçin broke the silence. "Do you ever wish you could just pause everything?" she asked. Barış smiled faintly. "Right now." She nodded. He looked around the quiet restaurant, then back at her. "I think we already did." Her eyes softened, and in that moment something changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a feeling that had been there all along, finally finding its place. The waiter approached again, gently reminding them that the restaurant would be closing soon. They both nodded, almost reluctantly. Barış stood first this time, offering his hand, not out of formality but something more instinctive. Elçin looked at it for a second before placing her hand in his. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight. They walked out together into the cool night air. The city was quieter now, the noise reduced to a distant murmur. For a moment they stood outside the restaurant without speaking. Neither seemed eager to end the night. "It's late," Elçin said softly. "Yeah," Barış replied. Another pause. But neither moved. Instead they looked at each other. Really looked, as if trying to understand something that didn't need words. And somehow in that quiet moment the evening transformed. What started as a simple dinner had become something else entirely. Something deeper. Something unforgettable. The night stretched ahead of them, filled with possibilities neither had planned for. And as they finally began to walk down the softly lit street together, side by side, one thing was clear. This was no longer just a quiet dinner. It was the beginning of a memory they would carry with them long after the night had ended. It was the beginning of a memory they would carry with them long after the night had ended. The night outside felt calmer than usual, as if the world itself had decided to slow down just for them. Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu walked side by side along the softly lit street, neither in a hurry, neither willing to break the silence too quickly. The rhythm of their footsteps matched without effort, a quiet harmony that didn't need planning. A gentle breeze passed through, carrying with it the faint scent of the night air. Elçin wrapped her arms lightly around herself, not from the cold, but from the feeling that the moment was becoming something she wanted to hold on to. Barış noticed. Without saying anything, he slowed his steps slightly, turning his head just enough to look at her. "Are you cold?" he asked. Elçin shook her head with a soft smile. "No, not really." But something in her voice made him pause. He stopped walking. Elçin took a step forward before realizing he wasn't beside her anymore. She turned back, her expression curious. "Why did you stop?" Barış hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Then, instead of answering directly, he took a step closer to her. "Because," he said quietly, "I don't want this night to end too quickly." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. For a brief second she didn't respond. Her eyes searched his, trying to understand the depth behind his words. There was no performance there, no hesitation, just sincerity. "I don't want it to end either," she admitted softly. The distance between them felt smaller now. Not physically but emotionally. They began walking again, but slower this time, as if stretching every second. The street opened up into a quieter path, lined with trees whose leaves whispered softly in the night breeze. "Do you remember the first time we met?" Elçin asked suddenly. Barış smiled faintly, his gaze drifting ahead. "Of course I do. You seem so serious," she teased lightly. "I was," he replied. "I didn't know what to expect." Elçin laughed gently. "And now?" He glanced at her again. "Now I still don't know what to expect, but I'm not worried about it anymore." She looked at him, surprised by the simplicity of his answer. There was something comforting about it. They reached a small park, almost hidden from the main road. The entrance was simple, marked by an old iron gate that stood slightly open. Without needing to discuss it, they both stepped inside. The park was quiet. A few dim lights illuminated the pathway, and a wooden bench sat beneath a large tree, its branches stretching out like a protective shelter. Elçin walked toward the bench and sat down, her movements slow and thoughtful. Barış followed, taking a seat beside her, but not too close, leaving just enough space for comfort, yet close enough to feel connected. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of thoughts, of feelings, of everything they hadn't yet said. Elçin looked up at the sky, where a few faint stars managed to break through the city's glow. "It's peaceful here," she said. Barış nodded. "Yeah, it is." Another quiet moment passed. Then, almost unexpectedly, Elçin spoke again. "Do you ever think about what really matters?" she asked. Barış leaned back slightly, considering the question. "More than I used to," he replied. "And what does matter?" she asked, turning her head to face him. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her, really looked before speaking. "Moments like this," he said finally. Her expression softened. There was no need to ask what he meant. She understood. A gentle stillness settled between them, deeper than before. The world outside the park seemed distant now, almost irrelevant. Elçin's hand rested lightly on the bench between them. Her fingers relaxed. Barış noticed it, his gaze lingering for a moment before he looked away again, as if unsure whether to act on instinct or remain still. But something about the night encouraged honesty, encouraged courage. Slowly, carefully, his hand moved closer. Not suddenly, not forcefully, just enough that their fingers brushed. The contact was light, almost unintentional, but neither of them pulled away. Instead, after a brief pause, Elçin shifted her hand slightly, allowing their fingers to rest together naturally. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Barış exhaled quietly, a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The warmth of her hand against his felt grounding real. Elçin didn't look at him right away. She kept her gaze forward, her expression calm, but her heart beating just a little faster. "This is nice," she said softly. Barış nodded. "It is." Time seemed to slow even further. Minutes passed, or maybe longer, they couldn't tell. At some point, Elçin turned to face him fully. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything," he replied. She hesitated. Not because she was unsure, but because she wanted to say it the right way. "Do you think some nights change things?" she asked. Barış didn't look away. "I think some nights reveal things," he said. Her eyes searched his again, deeper this time. "And what has tonight revealed?" she asked quietly. He held her gaze. "That I don't want this to be just one night," he said. The words hung in the air between them. Clear. Honest. Unavoidable. Elçin felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. Not overwhelming, not sudden, but steady, certain. She smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough to show what she felt. "I was hoping you'd say that," she admitted. The space between them no longer felt like distance. It felt like something waiting to be closed. Barış shifted slightly closer, still giving her time, still allowing her to decide the pace. Elçin didn't move away. Instead, she leaned in just a little. And in that quiet park, under the soft glow of dim lights and the gentle whisper of leaves, the evening reached a new depth. No rush. No pressure. Just a shared understanding that something meaningful had begun. The kind of moment that doesn't need to be announced, because it's already felt. And as they sat there together, hands still gently intertwined, one truth became impossible to ignore. This night was no longer just memorable. It was becoming the beginning of something real. The quiet park held on to their moment as if it didn't want to let go. Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu remained seated on the wooden bench, their hands still gently intertwined. The world around them felt distant now, like everything beyond that small space had faded into a soft blur. Neither of them rushed to speak, because sometimes silence carries more truth than words ever could. Elçin slowly turned her hand, letting her fingers rest more comfortably in his. The movement was natural, unforced. It wasn't a question, it was an answer. Barış noticed, and a quiet warmth spread through him. "You know," he said softly, his voice almost blending into the night. "I've had nights that looked perfect but didn't feel like this." Elçin glanced at him, her expression calm but curious. "And what does this feel like?" He thought for a moment. "Honest," he said. The word lingered between them. Elçin nodded slowly. "That's rare." "It is," Barış agreed. "Especially for us." She understood what he meant. Their lives were often surrounded by expectations, appearances, and constant attention. Real moments, unfiltered, unplanned, were hard to come by. But this was different. Elçin leaned back slightly, her shoulder almost brushing against his. "Do you think we've been avoiding this?" she asked. Barış raised an eyebrow gently. "Avoiding what?" "This," she said, gesturing lightly between them. "Whatever this is." He let out a quiet breath, considering her words. "Maybe not avoiding," he replied. "Maybe just waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For the right moment," he said. Elçin smiled faintly. "And this is it?" Barış looked around, the quiet park, the soft lights, the stillness of the night, before returning his gaze to her. "I think it might be," he said. There was something steady in his voice. Not uncertain. Not rushed. Just sure. Elçin felt it. And instead of questioning it, she let herself accept it. The air around them seemed to grow even softer, as if the night itself approved of their quiet realization. After a moment, Elçin shifted slightly closer, closing the small space that had remained between them. Their shoulders now touched lightly, a simple connection that felt stronger than anything spoken. Barış didn't move away. Instead, he turned just enough to face her more fully. "You're quiet," he said. Elçin let out a soft breath. "I'm just trying to remember this." He looked at her intrigued. "Remember?" She nodded. "Moments like this don't come often. I don't want to forget how it feels." Barış's expression softened. "You won't," he said. "How can you be sure?" she asked gently. "Because I won't forget it either," he replied. Their eyes met again, and this time the silence between them felt even deeper. Not empty, but full of everything they were beginning to understand. A faint sound of leaves rustling above them broke the stillness for a brief second. Elçin glanced up, then back at him, her gaze lingering just a little longer than before. There was no hesitation now, only a quiet certainty. Barış slowly lifted his free hand, brushing a strand of hair gently away from her face. His touch was careful, respectful, but it carried meaning. Elçin didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into the moment, her eyes soft, her expression open. "Barış," she said quietly. He paused, giving her space to speak. But she didn't continue, because she didn't need to. Sometimes a name is enough. The way she said it, the softness, the warmth, said everything she couldn't put into words. Barış understood. He always had. The distance between them disappeared completely as he leaned in slightly, not suddenly, not unexpectedly, but in a way that gave her time, a choice. Elçin's heart raced, but not from uncertainty, from clarity. She closed the small gap herself. And in that quiet park, beneath the soft glow of the night, their foreheads rested gently together. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was real. They stayed like that for a moment, sharing the same quiet breath, the same space, the same understanding. "This really is different," Elçin whispered. Barış nodded, his voice just as soft. "Yeah, it is." Another moment passed. Then, slowly, naturally, their connection deepened. Not because they planned it, but because it felt right. When they finally pulled back slightly, nothing felt awkward or uncertain. Only calm. Only clarity. Elçin smiled. A genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. "So what happens now?" she asked. Barış let out a quiet chuckle, not out of amusement, but out of the simplicity of the question. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I think we don't overthink it." She nodded. "I like that." He stood up first this time, offering his hand again, not as a question, but as a continuation of everything they had just shared. Elçin took it without hesitation. They walked out of the park together, still close, still connected, but now with a new understanding between them. The streets were even quieter now, the night deeper, the world softer. But something had changed. Not around them. Within them. As they walked, Elçin glanced at him. "You realize this night isn't going to be easy to forget, right?" Barış smiled slightly. "I wouldn't want it to be." She looked ahead, her expression thoughtful but light. "Good," she said. "Because I don't think this is where it ends." Barış didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. Because for the first time that night, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt open. And as they disappeared into the quiet glow of the city lights, side by side, one thing became undeniable. This wasn't just a romantic evening to remember. It was the beginning of something they were finally ready to explore.